Here's Archie's Travels, Chapter 50, oh, entitled Resolving. He had no choice, he had to call it in. Back at the station, Jack was sitting in his big fat armchair, smoking a very large cigar. He'd had a great day, and he'd managed to embarrass a few of new recruits. He'd had them quivering in their boots like jelly on a waddle board. Jack loved the power that his job gave him, and he felt like a Roman emperor. Then he blew a huge ring of smoke into the air of his already smoke-filled office. Suddenly there was a loud knock on the door. It must be more tea and biscuits, he thought, as he looked around his sumptuous, luxurious office. Come in, he barked, and two young officers stood nervously before him, but they were not carrying a tray of tea. He was puzzled. Hello, Jack, said the officer, stepping forward gingerly. You're under arrest, he said, and he stared at Jack and didn't blink. Jack choked on his tea, and it stained the front of his cleanly pressed shirt. What for? He announced indignantly, but he knew what for. Before he could protest any further, large silver handcuffs were placed on his wrists, and he didn't have far to walk to the cells. He walked slowly with his head bowed, and he was a broken man. And when the cell door closed with a clang, he thought that life couldn't get any worse. But that was before he saw the grinning hulk of a man on his top bunk. Afternoon, Inspector, he said with a toothless grin. It's all done, said the young inspector, and he put down the phone nervously. Thank heavens for that, said Dolly, and she hugged James. And then she picked Archie up into her arms and said, Things are going to be great from now on, she said, and she delicately stroked Archie's happy head. He barked loudly, and it was obvious that he agreed with her. This calls for a celebration, said James, and he looked down at Archie, who was shivering in the cold. Follow me, he said, and he took Dolly by the hand, and she had no idea where they were going, and neither did Archie. They came to a familiar stop, and even Archie looked excited. A familiar shop. James looked round quizzically until he found what he was looking for. That's exactly right, he said enthusiastically, and he pointed to a lovely tartan coat. Dolly looked surprised and then pleased, and Archie barked loudly in delight. It was so colourful and warm-looking that Archie couldn't wait to try it on. It fit so snugly that it was like being covered in a snug little blanket, and it was so cold outside that he definitely needed it. He looks adorable, said Dolly as she bent down to stroke him. Archie followed them out of the shop. He was feeling proud and happy, and he walked around town like a king in his kingdom. His travels were over for now. Archie had finally come home.